We're going to do one more thing with code sharing. We want to share our database connection. This is going to work a lot better if I'm not trying to talk over 20 people. Thanks. So you'll notice here's our games.php. We have our database connection here. Here's our game.php. We've got the same connection again. And if I open up my delete page again and on save, we've got it again. So obviously this is something that can change, and it is a big pain for us to have to type. I did make you type it for the first 2 months of class to try to get you familiar with what that connection string looks like. I think everybody now knows how to connect to a database, so we can start doing this one time per application. So we shouldn't have to type this connection string again. Okay? So let's go ahead and make a new file. We're going to want to include this file in all our other pages, so let's give it a nice, simple, short name. Let's call it db.php. Nice, simple name. So now I'm going to go to my games.php. I'll take these two lines. This line 12, this is optional, but this is useful for when we do error handling. It's good to have warnings and errors turned on. So I'm going to take those two lines, I'm going to copy them to my clipboard, and I am just going to paste them in here. Now, we don't have to include PHP tags in this file if we don't want to. Why? Well, how would I replace this code? How are we going to link to it? So if I delete this, what are we going to replace it with? Yeah, we'll use require once db.php. That's a lot shorter and simpler, right? This is what we'll do from now on. So this is already inside of PHP tags. So the PHP tags in here, they're optional. It's going to work the same way whether they're here or whether they're not here. We don't see them at runtime anyway, right? I like to keep them in, and here's why. When I keep the PHP tags in here, then PHP Storm gives me my code hinting, right? If I take these PHP tags out, when I do this and call a PHP function here, my code editor, I'm not inside PHP tags in this file, so I don't get my code hinting. So some of you may say, well, it offends my programming structure in the sense to have nested PHP tags when it's not necessary. That's fine. If you prefer to have it without the PHP tags, you can take them out. But I find for coding purposes, it's actually easier to keep them in. So if we save our db.php this way, save our games.php, we should be able to go and click our view games page. We shouldn't see any difference. It should work exactly the same way it did before. So I can go back. Oops, where am I? I can click view games, still get my list. So what I want you to do is modify the other three games pages. We have our game.php, we have delete game.php, and we have save game. On all of these, I want you to replace the database connection with an include or require once call. So now our database connection will only live in one file, our db.php. So in game, it will be up near the top. Game in the name is using your database. There are 4 of them. Wherever you find a database connection, replace it with require once or include db.php. I prefer to use it but you can use any of them. What's the difference between include and require? This would be a fantastic final exam question if there's a multiple choice section. Anthony?
Require makes it not run if there's an error, but include makes it run despite error.
Yeah, so include basically the file's optional. If it's not found, the rest of the page still executes. With require, nothing will work. So here it makes sense to use require because our code below is going to fail if we can't connect, don't find the database file, right? So it's not optional, really. It's mandatory. So I think it's better to use require once. Yep, I did. So they're right here in Blackboard. They're right here inside lesson 8. So you'll have that as a reference. So if I ask you that question on the exam and it's open book and you don't get the answer right, I'm going to be worried because the answer's here. So also on our save page, we're going to use it here too. So save game has it. Delete game, game, and game. So there are 4 places in your application where you should be replacing your connection string with your require once function. And now if I go back, all my pages should still work. I should be able to view, delete, edit. Everything's still working as it did before, but our code is much more efficient, right? We've written less code, and now it's modular, so we can easily change that connection string. Right? If I want to change it, right now I'm connecting to my local database. If I want to connect to DreamHost, I can just open up this file and add my DreamHost credentials here. It's much easier. And this is often what we do. We may have a local database for development and a live production database. We could put both connection strings here, just comment one out, enable the other one when we want to change from using one database to the other. So from now on, we're not going to have to touch, we shouldn't have to touch this file again. We build any other pages to work with our database in this application. We'll just call require once and we've got access to the database. Are there any other questions about using require or include at this point? Anthony?
When would you use it without the once?
Okay, let's say we built something into a module that we created as a separate page. Let's say we had like a file upload page, right, where the user could browse and upload a file, and we wanted to build a page where the user could say upload 5 different files. And we wanted to do the same kind of processing on all of them. Maybe we wanted to resize them. We wanted to create thumbnails. So let's say we had a page called upload or upload file. If we used include and we didn't use once, we could then embed it 5 different times. So the user would get 5 separate upload boxes and all of that code would run 5 times.
So it would require once, like minor leap.
If you say require once and you try to include the same file twice, you'll get an error. It'll say, no, you can't include this same file more than once. In that case, you'd have to use include or require instead of include once or require once. So if you want to be sure that file is only used once, you would use include once or require once. Generally, it's rare that we would be including the same file multiple times on the same page. It does happen, but it's not common.
Instead of including a file more than once, could you use a class and create separate objects?
Yep, that would be another way of doing it.
Would that be like a much cleaner way?
It depends, because it may be that there are visual elements that need to be repeated on the page. So in that case, you might include or require the same file multiple times so that it could show. It's a very good question. Any other questions about include and require? Okay. So we've got time. This shouldn't take us tons of time. If we don't get through everything today, I have a lab for you today, but we'll see how we progress with the material. One of the things we want to look at is when stuff goes wrong, when our applications break. Okay. So what kinds of things, when we're building web application, what kinds of things can go wrong that will cause errors in our application? Okay, so server outages, or sometimes their servers are being need to be rebooted, which will mean they're offline for a few minutes. What else can happen that could cause problems? Okay, files not found. Yep, that's probably the most common one, is a broken link or a file path that's wrong. What else would cause errors? Yep, our database goes down, or there's something wrong with our connection string. We can't connect to the database. Anything else that could happen that would cause an error? Yep, so too many users at once. Okay, so we can get timeouts. Anything else?
Other developers pass null to your objects.
Okay, yep, so coding errors.
Yeah.
Sometimes bugs or logic errors or syntax errors in our own code, right? Lots of things can go wrong. We also can get attacked. We can have denial of service. We can have SQL injection. There's all kinds of things that will cause errors. What should happen when an error happens? So let's say a page like this one, like we've got our video games page that lists our pages, right? So the user clicks on view games and the database is being restarted. So this page, when it calls require once to db.php, tries to connect, it throws an error, it can't connect. Right now, what will happen? So let's say, actually, let me just go in, let's say I'm making an error here. So let's say I'll I've got an invalid credential. What's gonna happen when I click view games now? Okay. Well, it didn't print out an error, but I didn't get anything in this case. So it might print an error, or we might get half a page. What should happen? Actually, let me put that one back. We'll make a different change. Let's say my connection's okay. Let's say I select from the table called game instead. So nothing's happening, but as the user, I'm kind of left scratching my head wondering what's going on. Okay. What should happen? Yeah, let's take the user to an error page. Okay. What should that error page look like? Yeah, okay. What else should be on the page? Should just be a white page with black text that says, oops, sorry. Okay, what should be at the top of that page so that it looks like the rest of our site? What should be at the bottom of the page? Footer. So really it should look something similar to this page, right? Whenever an error happens, we don't want to show the user our error messages. We want to take them off to an error page. For sure, we want to do that. Okay. Sometimes also users will just put stuff in that we didn't validate for, we didn't anticipate somehow. That might cause errors. Okay. So we might get attacked. So we will definitely want custom error pages. So let's start with that one. Let's take our default page. I'm going to copy everything, and I'm going to make a new file, new PHP file. Let's call this error.php. So what we want is a generic error page will tell the user always a good idea to tell users that you're aware of the problem and that you'll fix it. It doesn't really matter what message we give them, but something to reassure them that the problem is going to get fixed. So I'm going to change my heading and change the content on this page. So whenever an error happens, we want users to get this page instead. So I could load my error page. We obviously aren't going to put a link to it. This is what users will see in the event we find an error. Now, this page isn't going to load automatically, right? If I go back to my View Games page, I have an error here. It doesn't automatically take me here. So what are we going to have to do in our code? How are we going to tell the server, hey, if an error happens, take the user to this error page? So I've got an issue in my games page. So I'm going to open up your games page and, just like I did, deliberately put in an incorrect table name. We're going to break our SQL command. So what should we do with this page so that if an error gets generated, the user gets directed to the error.php page instead? Because it doesn't happen automatically. We're going to have to program this.
You can catch an error, you can try to catch an exception that gets thrown.
You got it. PHP, like Java, has a try-catch syntax. So try a block of code, and if we get an exception, catch it, and then we'll redirect the user. So our syntax would be something like most of you are familiar with, trying and catching. So where would it make sense here? Where should we open our try block? What line would it make sense to put in the try command? Before or after the require once?
I think it should be included inside. The require once should be inside.
Yeah, it should. So let's try to connect to the database, because that might throw an error, right? If we can't connect to the database, it'll generate an error. So we want to catch that error if it happens. So above this, so we'll add an error handler in case anything breaks. So we'll add in try, and we'll open a curly bracket. Where should we end our try? What line? So we've opened that curly bracket. Where should the closing bracket go? At the very end down here? After require? Well, what line is the error? We could put it here, but what line is the error going to happen on? Yeah, our error is here. So we don't just want to do it here. Where should it go? What line number should we close that curly bracket? Yeah, all the way down here. Let's close it here. So all of this stuff, we want all of that inside of our try block, right? Yeah.
Why don't you include the require once folder? It can happen something here. Just like that.
We could. I'm going to print out the footer anyway. So now after that bracket, we want to catch an exception. And I'll just give it a name. I'll just give it a variable name of $E. That's just a variable name. You could call it $error. It doesn't matter. And then we'll open another set of curly braces. So what should we do if an error occurs?
to that.
Yeah, let's automatically direct the user. So what function will take us to another page? So we'll use header, location, and what page do we want to load? We want to load error.php. So try to connect, try to query the database, and try to display all of this data in a grid, and then disconnect. If any of this process fails, catch the error and redirect to error.php. Let's try this and see if it works. So now I'm going to click, I'll go back to my home page. Now I'll click View Games. And because of that error, it's taken me to my error page. Now you may have gotten an error trying to load your error page that said header's already sent. Anybody get that message? Why did you get that message? And how do we fix it? Has to do with using header location. We talked about this before reading week, the first time we used header location. Yeah, we need to start our output buffering at the top and flush it at the bottom. So at any page where we might redirect, the very first line with no white space above it needs to be OB start. Yeah, inside, because it's a PHP function. So start our output buffering on line 1. And then down at the very bottom, after you require your footer, call OB flush to clear the output buffer. So right at the very top, we've called OB start. Even before we have our header, and down at the bottom, after our footer, we'll call OB flush. You try your page now, it should take you to your error page successfully. So now, as long as I have that error, I get redirected here. There's a really important thing you need to know about using try-catch in PHP. It doesn't catch syntax errors. So if you leave out a semicolon or a bracket or a quote, the try-catch won't help you. So I'm going to try it. Watch what happens. Let's say I take out, oops. Let's say up here, I leave out this semicolon. So this is before my SQL error. If I take out the semicolon here, now I have a syntax error. Now my try-catch doesn't work, right? My page is crashed. So it's not designed to fix your syntax. You have to fix your syntax through testing and debugging your pages. Okay. So it's designed for runtime errors when processes are trying to run and can't run. But it's not for fixing your PHP typing errors. Okay. In some languages, try-catch will also handle your syntax errors, not in PHP. Matt?
I got can modify header information.
Do you have OB start at the top?
Yeah.
On the very first line of the file?
Yep.
There's no white space above it. It's on line 1?
Yep.
And you've called OB flush at the bottom?
Yep.
Okay, I'll have to come have a look at it. Now, the one other thing that we can do, I'm just going to comment it out. We've told the user that we're aware of the problem, but whenever we catch an error, not only do we want to take them to our error page, what else should we do so that we can actually fix the error? We have a couple of options. Okay, who would you send the error report to? Yeah, so use the mail function and send who, and who are you going to mail? yeah, send it to yourself. Whoever is responsible for the code, send yourself an email with information about that error. So in here, before we redirect, so here we'll redirect to the error page. Sending ourselves in, what would another option be to keep track of the errors? What else could we do? Yeah, the other option is we could create a log. So either create an error log table in our database and write to there, or in many cases, they're just written to a text file, because maybe the problem is we can't connect to the database. If we can't connect to the database, we can't store an error log. So we could write it to a text file, is another COMP feature. I like to personally just email myself the errors. So we can send ourselves.
Email for errors? Create a specific email account for errors?
That's what I do. I have, so on my domain name, I've created an account called errors at the domain name. And in all my code, whenever there's an error, I send myself all the information. It sends me the error message. It sends me the URL of the page. Might send me the user's IP. If there's a form, it sends me all of the form values, which shows me if someone's trying to hack the site by sending SQL injection into the forms. I can see all those things. So send yourself an email. Don't send it to me. Put in an email address that you own. So give it a subject, and then to include the error details, our $E, that represents the exception. So by including that variable as the message body, I'm going to get the error message sent to me. Now I'm running it locally, so I don't know that my local server will send an email, but I think I could show you what it would actually look like, because I sent one a little earlier today. I was just testing this out. So I sent myself an error from my PHP page. Oh, no, I just, yeah, you know what, I'm going to have to upload it to try it out. So let me connect to FileZilla. So I'll create a lesson 8 folder. So I still have this error in my page. Now mine's going to crash earlier because my database connection is wrong. Let's see what happens. So when I click here, so I get taken to my error page. That's good. My error handling, my try catch has worked. And now I've got an email right away. It tells me there was an error. And now, rather than the user seeing this error message, I've got it in my inbox, right? I got a connection refused because it's trying to use my local connection string. Good. So I know, okay, the connection string is wrong on the server. I can go into that page and change it. So it gives me the name of the file where the error occurred, and it tells me what's wrong. So many days I wake up and I roll over from bed, grab my phone, check my email, and the first thing I see is usually all the errors that occurred overnight, most of which are SQL injection attempts, which my try-catch blocks are catching and notifying me of. This is how I know when someone's trying to hack one of my applications, because I see these emails in my inbox all the time. In fact, I'm sure if I showed you my inbox somewhere, it probably has a whole bunch. Let's see.
How many hack attempts have you got through your applications?
I used to get them, well, for Walmart, I used to get about 24 a night. About 3 a.m. every night, I get about 24 emails. So here's an error message that got emailed to me a couple days ago. This is actually a bogus issue. It's not actually a problem. So here's the error message. Here's the full stack trace of what page it was on and what method threw the error. Here's another one. So here I can even see the query string, what page and what property this error, what listing this error happened on. So then I can try this URL out. One of the nice things about having them emailed to you is many times I'll get an error email, I'll go and fix the problem, and then an hour or two later, my client will call or email and say, hey, I got an error on the site. And I say, I know, I already fixed it. Well, you look pretty good when you do that, right? If you're getting notified as soon as those messages happen, you can fix things quickly. So this is always a good idea. I find this is better than logging it in a text file and having to search through the logs. Just keep them in your email. Okay. So we've got try catch. We've got our generic error page. We can redirect. So I should be putting this on all of the pages, all of our pages that connect to the database. I'm not going to do that right now. I'll do that after class. So game should have a try catch, delete, anywhere we're connecting to the database and doing any kind of processing or create, read, update, and delete, we should probably be running a try catch in case an error happens. I'll fix, I will put my code back so that my page runs, but at least if for some reason my database doesn't connect, rather than it crashing and the user seeing an error message, we've now handled it gracefully and notified ourselves. Okay.
So the variable you created that except for exception, it will record everything, whatever was happening?
It'll catch the first error. As soon as it catches an error, you know what, Deepak, you bring up a good point. Some developers will say, this is really not good form to just catch any errors. What we should be doing is trapping for specific kinds of errors. And yes, it's probably true in some way. We could be trapping for specific error exceptions rather than catching anything. I've found for web applications, this method has served me well for many, many years. I find this works, and by emailing myself the error, I can stay on top of what's happening and fix it. If you want to have multiple catch statements and try to catch different kinds of errors or throw exceptions, you can do that. And some programmers prefer that. If you're comfortable with that style from Java programming, by all means, you can do that here. You don't have to use that method. So you could certainly trap for specific types of exceptions if you prefer. No problem.
Although there is a danger with too many, like checking for too many exceptions, you have to make sure that the exception you kept is in the same scope that you're in.
Yes.
As well as exceptions should be exceptional, which is a quote from Code Complete as well.
Right.
So you only need to catch exceptions if like something really rare happens. Otherwise, you should be using an if statement or something
Right.
like that.
So if we're doing a calculation, we might catch a divide by zero exception, for example, right? Because we can expect our code might generate that. George, stay with me. 15 more minutes. You can do it. We have to do one other thing. Okay. We haven't handled the most common type of exception, which would be what happens if we get a URL that doesn't exist. Okay. So 404 is the most common type of error. So we could take the user when this happens. We could just take them here, but most sites have two error pages. They have the general error page. They also usually have a specific 404 page that tells users when the page they've asked for doesn't exist. So let's make a 404 page And then we need to write a small server configuration file that will tell the Apache server, hey, if the user asks for a URL that doesn't exist, take them to our 404 not found page. So making the 404 page is really simple. Let's go to error.php, copy everything. We're just going to modify this very slightly for making a 404 page. We'll make one more page, which we'll call 404.php. We'll delete what's here. We'll paste in the contents from our error page, and we'll just change a couple things. Usually 404 pages are descriptive. It's not just a generic error. It's specific that the page isn't found. I'll change the title to say page not found. When this happens, we don't need an error notice, right? Your inboxes aren't big enough to handle all of the 404 errors that probably would get generated. So we want this page to load if there's a 404 request, which is the HTTP status code for page not found. Now this won't load automatically. We have to configure the server. Now there's a few ways to do this. With a real world hosting company, usually in the host control panel, if I just log into one of the hosts I use, they actually let us just set this up, which is kind of neat. So if I pick one of my domains and go here, let's see. If I go to custom error pages, you know, for 404 not found, I can just specify a URL. So I've created a 404.htm. So I can just set it up in here, point it to a URL, and now my 404 page will be active for any request. On DreamHost, you guys, we don't have access to go into their control panel and do it, but we can just create a small configuration file and upload that to the server, and it'll do this redirect for us. So we're going to make one more file. So we'll make a new file. This is an Apache configuration file. The file name is .htaccess. There's nothing before the dot. It's like a Linux system file, basically. So .htaccess, 2 C's and 2 S's. This is, you can't call it anything you want. This is a specific name for an Apache configuration file. So this lets us override settings, default settings of the web server. So we'll create it as .htaccess. And what we want to set up here, we only need one line of code. We want to set up an error document. First, we specify the error code. So if we get a 404 error, we now want to specify the full URL to our 404 page. So for me, it's like this. For you, it will be your full URL on the server. So gc xxxx.computerstudies/lesson8/404.php. So there's a space, and you have to spell this stuff exactly right. So once I save that file, if I now try to load a page that doesn't exist, htaccess is telling the web server where to go on a 404 error. Well, the user's typing and they accidentally typed the name of the page incorrectly. We want them to be redirected to our 404 page. They might miss a letter, or they've bookmarked a page in their browser that they're used to visiting, and we've removed that page. So when they click that bookmark, we now want them to go to our 404 page, telling them the page is gone. Or maybe, Liz, in one of our links, maybe we've put a typo in one of our links. The user clicks it, rather than getting the ugly 404 page, we want them to get this one. So now if I go to a file that doesn't exist, now it takes me to my 404 page. It says we can't find that page. So automatically now all our 404s are handled.
Just a note, like on the weekend, I was trying to get the HT access to work with Dreamhost. I have a personal account with them, and you have to activate it separately.
Okay, that's new. I haven't had to do that before. I will try that.
I know that's just specific for Dreamhost.
Okay, I'll try it right now on DreamHost and see what happens.
I think it's enabled on the computer studies ones already, but
It should, yes, it should be. So I'm going to upload. So there's my 404. There's my HT access. So we'll see what happens. So if I try and go here, yeah, it works. I get my 404. So now it's not that somebody can't break our application. It's that we've put measures in place that when things go wrong, and they will go wrong, we've at least handled them, right? They have a generic error page for any errors we didn't expect or server outages. We have a 404 page for pages that aren't found, and we've got error notifications being sent to us. Okay. So those are all of the kind of tricks we have in our toolbox for handling these kinds of errors. So now I want to give you your lab, and then I will set you free. Here's what I want you to do for your lab. So these notes, these slides, I went through them pretty quickly, but I basically covered here. All of these things are, this slideshow is in the Lesson 8 folder. So if you want to read through it or have these notes to reference, they're on Blackboard for you. So here's what I want you to do for your lab. It's due Wednesday night at midnight. Okay. So what I want you to do is I want you to take assignment 1, your little 3-page website you submitted back in week 5, and I want you to add error handling to it. So you don't have to build a new site. Okay, so you have 3 pages there. You had a form with a drop down, you had a save page, and you had an HTML table page. Those 3 pages all need try-catch blocks. Okay. At the top, you should have OB start, and at the bottom, you should have OB flush. If an error is caught, you need to redirect to the error page and send yourself an email. You also need a 404 page, and you need an HT access file. So when I load your assignment, if I try and go to any page name that doesn't exist, I should get redirected to your 404 page. You don't need to include headers and footers because it wasn't part of the assignment, so you don't have to build those. Okay, so your error and your 404 pages can just be a plain page with 1 line of text. You know, this is the error page, this is the 404 page.
I want to clean up my code from assignment 1. Can I do that?
Up to you.
All right.
Okay, so basically all you need to do for the lab, so you don't have to redo assignment 1. I just want you to add the things we've done in this hour into assignment 1, zip it up, and again include the link, and give me the zip file and the link to it by Wednesday night. Okay, so I want to see the generic error page, try catch, 404, and error notices being emailed to you, not to me. Okay, so all of today's lessons are on YouTube already. Next week, we're going to deal with security and authentication. Okay, have a great week. I will see you guys next week.